All right, so thank you all for joining us on this Friday afternoon. My name is Annika Lee, and I am the Public Affairs Coordinator at the Digital Supercluster. And I'm pleased to welcome you to our third discovery workshop following our town hall a few weeks ago. Before we get started, we respectfully acknowledge that in Canada, we live, work, and learn on the unceded traditional and ancestral land of Indigenous people. As myself and much of the Supercluster team are based in Vancouver, British Columbia, we are gathered here on the traditional ancestral territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. And we encourage you to take a moment to acknowledge and let us know in the chat the traditional territory that you are joining us from. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and will be distributed following the session to all registrants. This is meant to be a very collaborative and interactive workshop. So if at any point during the session you have a question or a comment, please feel free to type into the chat or just raise your hand and we'll call on you to unmute. And with that, I will hand it over to Sydney.
Thank you so much, Annika. And thanks so much to everyone who's joining today. And to everyone who was able to join the July Town Hall workshop as well. As Annika mentioned, these workshops are part of a series of ways that we're looking to connect with our community and our partners and the ecosystem at large to plan and think about how we want to approach phase 2. So for those of you who've attended other workshops in the past, there's going to be some similarities, but the focus of today's workshop is really on understanding where we can go next with talent and workforce development. So assuming that most or all of you were here for the town hall workshop, I will start with a brief overview of a recap of the town hall as it relates to talent and workforce development. And I'm happy to jump in and unpack any components of it deeper if you'd like to. As Annika mentioned, this is a very open and collaborative forum. So if you've got questions, just raise your hand or throw them in the chat. As you go, I likely won't be able to see people's faces once I'm presenting, and so just butt in, please. It's great to see a couple familiar faces as well on this call. And to introduce myself, for those of you who I haven't connected with, my name is Sydney Goodfellow, and I'm the director of the Digital Learning Lab, which is the Digital Supercluster's Center for Talent and Workforce Development. Many of you may know the work we've done in this space as capacity building, and this is really our focus specifically on talent and workforce development as our major strategic area within capacity building. So with that, I'm going to just take a minute and share my screen with you so I can start a bit of a recap of the town hall and what we discussed there as relates to talent. So as I mentioned, we're going to be exploring our priorities for phase 2. Much of this will look familiar to those of you who've been to multiple of these sessions. We're looking today to really gather perspectives and input on our strategy for talent and workforce development. We know generally the direction that we're looking to head in, but the power of this community is that everybody here brings a different perspective and a different approach and different things that can contribute to the overall success of our strategy moving forward. We exist as the Digital Learning Lab, and I'll talk a little bit about this, but we really exist to build the skilling and talent ecosystem as much as we can and to be a catalytic and collaborative force within that. We know Canada has a very strong leadership in education, learning and development, and of course, technology and educational technology. And so really, how can we leverage that and grow that and contribute to that while solving some of these major workforce challenges that are faced by growing companies across Canada and the individuals that are looking to participate in the digital economy as well, whether that's in a tech company or any kind of tech-enabled role. So again, a bit of a summary of the town hall, our journey to date. I really share this to show kind of we're accelerating the development and scaling of digital technologies, but also approaches. And as you can see, that fourth area there, an inclusive and digitally skilled workforce is a critical pillar of the work that we do in the supercluster in general. As we're looking to build technologies and innovations, we see the important role that people play in that. People who have the skills to build these new technologies and innovations, dream them up and lead the development of them, and also to ensure that communities that wouldn't normally have the same access to the resources and benefits of the digital economy can get that access. And that's where we talk about our Growing Connected Communities pillar. I include this slide here, even though it's a little bit more relevant to the technology leadership programming, because this speaks to the different commercial areas where we're advancing innovation, but it's also a good snapshot of some of the areas where we can be growing digital skills and competencies, because you can see there's a range here of industries and subsectors that intersect with things like natural resources and health and some of our major priorities, but that focus on those kinds of specific skills that would need to go into this. So in the area of AI and machine learning, that's a huge area of growth for the supercluster, and there's a major need for skilled workers in that space as well, all along quantum computing, genomics, etc. So as we're thinking about the kinds of competencies that we're looking to develop, we're looking not only to the broad ecosystem, but also to our members and the projects that we're trying to build and the kind of workforce development that needs to happen to make those projects successful. Again, really getting into the investment themes and areas of focus for our organization as a whole. As Annika mentioned, this is the third of 4 interactive workshops that we're going to be doing on these. And this one, like I said, is focused specifically on talent and capacity, or talent and workforce development. We'll get into what our overall goals are and what we're really trying to do. But as I mentioned, talent is a catalytic force for the growth and success of the innovation ecosystem. So what role can we play to ensure that success? Together with our partners, and this pertains specifically to the Digital Learning Lab and talent and workforce development, we're changing the way that workforce development happens in Canada. So we do that through a couple of main ways. We're, of course, first and foremost, training and placing people. So right now, our portfolio of projects, as you'll recall, is about 19 projects specifically focused on talent and workforce development that totals an overall portfolio size of about $40 million. And we're training and placing about 6,500 people across Canada in rural and urban areas, across different demographic groups, including underrepresented groups. And we're really looking at how can we make these training programs more accessible, less costly, more industry relevant and tied to employment opportunities in the near and long term, and really creating these kinds of cohesive and easy to understand pathways so that as people are trying to navigate their careers, they can see what the steps are to get from where they are to where they'd like to be, and for companies to be able to easily access the talent that they need. So really, above all, we're really looking at growing workforce development and growing the ecosystem in Canada that supports that. That leads to our ability to grow companies and communities, because as we know, people are what make up every company and community. So having those skills and that leadership contributes to that success. And we really focus in on innovation leadership and the skills and the mindset that goes into that, as well as supporting community growth and sustainable community growth. And through that, it's really about, like I said, enabling Canada's training ecosystem. And this includes learning and development companies, including technology companies that focus on L&D or learning and development, including things like data analysis of the labor market, post-secondary institutions, nonprofits. That's really a kind of a very diverse group of organizations that have a stake in workforce development and digital workforce development, specifically across Canada. So we see our role there as being that kind of convening and catalytic force, trying to grow that ecosystem so that we're better able to train people, grow companies, grow communities. So moving now, and you can see I'm moving through the summary rather quickly because I want to get to the good discussion parts. But like I said, feel free to stop if you want me to go through anything more deeply, or if you want to connect after the session as well. So jumping into the opportunities for talent and capacity, we did discuss this a little bit back in July, but really looking at opportunities in our 3 main pillars. And these pillars will remain in phase 2. And for us, it's really trying to understand the depth and breadth of these opportunities, and where within these 3 thematic areas, or these 3 areas of focus, that we can make the most impact together with our partners and with this ecosystem. So just in summary of these three main areas of focus, we've got pathways to digital jobs, which I mentioned is that kind of creating those opportunities for people to get the kind of skills training that they need to land a good, well-paying job in the near and the long term, and really reducing the cost and time that it takes to get someone job ready. And like I said, this includes things like post-secondary institutions, private training providers, and all of the parts that go around a person getting training and employment, including wraparound supports, childcare, transportation, mentorship, coaching, all of those parts that make up that ecosystem that ensure a person's long-term success in that role. In leading digital change, this is looking at the skills and mindset required to lead innovation within an organization. And this can take many forms. And this is one that we're really open to kind of exploring what's relevant to you, the community here. But what we've seen and what we've heard is really, there's a couple of parallel challenges. One is that it's hard to find senior talent in the technical space within within Canada, particularly with the kinds of not only the technical skills, but also the leadership and the creativity to kind of lead innovation, whether that's the development of a product, a system, navigating digital transformation of an organization, or growing an organization from that entrepreneurship lens. And so really that side of things, and also looking at the barriers and seeing the change in the makeup of the workforce as you move up in the seniority in an organization. So we see a relative amount of diversity in terms of the entry-level roles in Canada, but as you move up, that becomes less and less diverse and less inclusive. So understanding how we can support career pathways that enable more diverse leadership in the senior levels across Canada. So really these two kind of parallel challenges are where we've heard a lot from folks on where we should be focusing, but really just understanding what are the skills that a leader needs to lead innovation within an organization or within a community. And then thirdly, the Growing Connected Communities pillar is looking at novel approaches to community development, sustainable community development that come from people and workforce development. So taking a kind of people-oriented approach to community development as communities come online and become get access to connectivity, transition towards a clean economy, and what kind of opportunities are here? How can communities transition during these times? And how can we support the workforce through those? So again, these three pillars are very broad, and we really want to understand what are the specific areas that we can really go deep on. And I'm happy to unpack any of the existing projects that we have in these three spaces, but we can also talk about how they kind of connect into each other. So for example, if you had a project that you weren't sure if it was pathways or leading or communities, it can be all three. And really it's just about making sure that we're making impact in these areas. So as a starting point, our strategy includes the following concepts. We're really looking at accessibility as a main factor of success in terms of the training that we're creating. So I talked about making it faster and lower cost and addressing some of the systemic barriers that people face when participating in the digital economy. Adaptability, we talk a lot about the pace of change and how we need a system of training that can keep up with that pace of change and can include things like real-time labor market analytics and better use of data, for example. Standards, enhancing the portability and stackability of credentials. There is a lot of fantastic training that's happening across Canada. How can we make these talk to each other so that a learner can know how to stack these across different training standards? Collaboration, of course, this is a problem that's going to be solved collectively, as all things that come through the supercluster, we always take that lens of collaboration. Scope, what is the right scope of projects? We're really looking to build more bold and ambitious projects here, but not losing sight of the innovation that needs to happen, trying new things, advancing the L&D or learning and development practice, and building Canada's leadership in that. And of course, ensuring that skills training really connects to actual employer needs and people are getting training with line of sight to jobs or placement directly into jobs. During the town hall, we discussed three main kind of questions, and I'll do a little recap of some of the things that we heard during that session. So really, we're looking to talk about the same things today, but just in greater depth. So what opportunities do you see in talent and workforce development? What areas of opportunity for innovation in this space do you see? What can we do to encourage more demand-driven investment, so more industry involvement and making sure that this connects to employer needs? And are there specific skills or competencies or areas that you're looking to build or grow, either as a training provider or as an organization or as a community? Some of the things that we heard from the town hall participants in the previous session is that we need to come together as an ecosystem, coordinate our approaches, have shared forums where we can envision futures, different futures, and share lessons learned. We heard that tech talent is a major challenge for companies, continuing regardless of kind of the ups and downs, really looking at that major challenge continues to be present. There's opportunities for upskilling and reskilling within non-tech industries, looking at tech competencies within those, how we can identify certain skill sets to be developed more rapidly. So really, how can we break down bigger competency sets into smaller chunks that people can stack? How we can compare data to look for trends and needs and how those are different for different regions, so not a one-size-fits-all solution across Canada. Working to reduce systemic barriers, of course, and bring more equity, diversity, and inclusion into the workforce. This is something we talk about all the time and are always looking for ways to do this better. And supporting employers specifically to identify and hire from more diverse pools. So we talk a lot about training for individuals, but can we talk about training for employers as well? So that's it for the presentation. I'll pause there and just see if there are any questions for now before we move into the discussion portion and the workshops part. I know it was a lot of information very quickly. Feel free to throw up a hand or just jump out and speak. I can't see everyone's faces, so. Okay, without further ado then, I will just go ahead and share my screen for the workshop portion of today, where we're going to work on a discovery canvas. So those of you who have been part of the Supercluster for a long time have probably participated in ideation sessions with us before, and certainly those who've been to the previous workshop sessions related to this phase 2 strategy are familiar with this. But we're going to be walking through a bit of a brainstorming session today. So I will be looking for as much participation as you're willing to give, but then of course it's always great listening as an active form of participation as well. So if there's nothing that's coming to mind for you today, but you'd like to contribute after the fact or just have a one-on-one conversation or talk through some ideas or concepts, please don't hesitate to reach out, and I'm happy to have a follow-up discussion as well. So without further ado, this is a summary, again, of the goals that we're looking to cultivate. So we wanted to develop skills and opportunities for Canadians in the digital economy, just kind of very broad there. We're going to create fast and affordable pathways to digital jobs, build leadership and innovation, and drive community-based training and development while building stronger innovation ecosystems. So all of that to say, really taking this training, skill development approach to growing communities, companies, ecosystems, and individuals. We've got our 3 pillars there that I already summarized, and I won't walk through again, but pathways to digital jobs, leading digital change, and growing connected communities are our 3 main areas of focus. So what I'd like to do with you today is I will take notes as we're talking, and as ideas come to play, and hopefully we can shape and articulate a little bit of some of the challenges and opportunities and ideas that this group has to contribute. So in terms of how this will flow, first we'll run through and contextualize the challenge. So, you know, what is the talent challenge within Canada as it pertains to the digital economy, but also as it pertains to the transition that we talk about in other areas with the supercluster, like decarbonization, healthcare. You know, what is the talent challenge that pertains to the overall kind of things that we're seeing across the economy in Canada that the supercluster could support with? So how would we contextualize that challenge? How would we frame it essentially or articulate it? And then assessing the situation. So how big is this challenge? What are the kind of the components of it? What are the major parts? Is this a challenge that is pan-Canadian? Is this something that's unique to your region? How do we really assess these kind of different components that make it up? As we get into collaboration opportunities, we'll talk about who we would want to participate in this. So this could be as broad as governments and post-secondary institutions, and as narrow as the name of a specific organization that's doing something in the space really well, or individuals even. It can kind of be a range, and it's intended, all of this is intended as a starting point, not as a formal plan. The investment opportunities. So where might investment be catalytic? Where might investment support this area? One of the areas that we talk about a lot in the Digital Learning Lab is in the Supercluster. We think about leveraging investments in research and development, and really fostering industry investments into R&D. And within talent, we talk about the same, but in relation to L&D, or learning and development within an organization. So really supporting and putting those dollars where they make the most impact. And then, is there a way that we could articulate a particular solution that kind of flows out of these different pieces? So that's just to set the stage. We'll start by contextualizing the problem or challenge. We'll open the floor for anyone who wants to jump in here for some challenges, either that you are facing in your organization or that you've heard of in the ecosystem writ large.
I'll jump in. Kind of, I think maybe a mismatch between what people learn and what people need to be job ready. And then maybe on top of that, like if you look at like junior software developers coming into the market, aren't really ready to work on production code. So they provide a heavy tax to intermediate and senior developers on teams.
That's first, thanks so much, Ryan. That's really, really helpful. And I think that mismatch between what they learn and what they need to be job ready is a great articulation of what we're trying to explore in terms of making sure that employers are at the table in the training, at the development of the training itself. And I think that's something that we hear again and again, is that kind of job readiness piece. You mentioned specifically junior software developers, but we also hear this in other skill and competency areas and roles as well. Back to you or to someone else if someone wants to go on this question as well. What do you think? Do you have kind of a sense of talking about connecting industry into it? Are there other kind of roles where you're seeing this challenge happen in terms of not just junior software developers, but kind of across the board?
I would say also like any because the market's moving so quickly. Oh, there's a lot of hands up. So because the market's moving so quickly, you'll have, say, like a whole bunch of Java developers, but the market really needs like a JavaScript framework. So you've got people that have senior dev experience or some varying levels of experience, but aren't on the right stack. So they need to be reskilled quickly.
Right.
And maybe I'll just add in another one as well too on there as well, is you need just-in-time resources available to train on these platforms, and they need to be incentivized so they can do it, because it doesn't always have to be, and sometimes it's not the best thing for it to be a post-secondary or whatever. In specific situations, it could be industry experts or people working on those stacks.
That's really, really helpful. And I think it's interesting because when we think about reskilling, we often think about non-tech industries, but I think the pace of change within technology is such that even technology workers are needing to be upskilled and reskilled very regularly. So I think that's a great point. And that just-in-time resources piece is a great one. That kind of connects to something that someone said in the previous town hall, which is how can we break down the overall competencies that a person needs into smaller and more digestible chunks so that they don't have to leave the workforce for a long period of time to get those skills. They can just get them on the job. So thank you so much for that, Ryan. I think we'll come back to this. Next, I'm going to go over to Ralph. Hi, Ralph.
Hi, it's been a long time.
It has.
Basically, my comment's more about the context from tech startups. So in my work, we invest and support very early stage tech companies And we've noticed there's this potential opportunity, and it's a gap, and I'm not sure where to frame it, but I think it falls under your opportunity theme of leading digital change. It's that we have so many in Canada international students who are very, very talented, and after they graduate, a lot of them want to stay, and good for us, but we lose a lot of them because the requirement to stay is to get a full paying job. But a lot of the folks have been starting things and are fairly entrepreneurial during their studies, but then when they graduate, they can't continue those activities because starting your own startup doesn't allow you to stay in Canada. And I keep thinking about ways, that there is, in Canada, we have the startup visa program, but it doesn't apply to those folks who are already here. So I don't know how that could be an interesting challenge. How do we try to foster entrepreneurship in those folks? Because knowing that if they have these early entrepreneurship activities and experiences, probably they will be the leaders of tomorrow. When startups are looking for executives, they're looking for people who've busted their chops as being former founders and so on. So even if they had managed to find a job, which is hard enough as an international student, they might not, they might be great as developers, but they might not be the leaders of tomorrow. So that's kind of the challenge I'm trying to frame for international students.
That's a really, really interesting one, Ralph. Thank you for that. And I think, there's a couple of things that come to mind there, one of which is a policy question and kind of more of an immigration process question that I think pertains to how we can retain these international students without having to have full-time employment. In the meantime, I'm wondering, and I think this is something that we could talk about kind of even as a separate thing, is are there other ways that employment and entrepreneurship can coalesce? So where you can be employed full time, but really you're working on your startup as part of a learning while working piece. So I think there's some interesting stuff that we could play with there, and I think it's a really fantastic challenge. So thank you for that. Erin, I see your hand is next.
Yeah, so at Genome BC, we're really trying to tackle some of these pieces, starting with the education of healthcare professionals. And so the just-in-time resources are a key thing that we've identified as being necessary for our health workforce. But the other thing is the portability and stackability of credentials. There's an amazing wealth of opportunities for learning available internationally, but especially for our registered health professionals, trying to get those identified as continuing professional development opportunities is almost impossible, because that's all regulated by our local jurisdictions. And so if they're not involved in creating these pieces, they're less enthused about giving them credit for these spaces. So we've been starting to work on small videos to work on implementation of new tests, resource pages, and other pieces that are there, and hopefully moving past just the healthcare professionals in genomics and moving into the A&R and other spaces. But it's just all of these pieces speak for us in terms of what's needed to actually bring genomics into the forefront for us.
So Erin, just to make sure that I understand and I'm kind of capturing all of this. So if you wanted to go and get a credential internationally and then bring it back and practice genomics within Canada, how does that connect with the requirements within Canada? How would that connect with further learning within Canada? Is that kind of right?
So there's that piece, but there's also some of the more informal pieces. So those small bite-sized pieces that make for really good just-in-time resources. Some of those are the things that are we really struggle with getting credibility or credentialing. Yeah. So that's really where I see the challenges, that they've been accredited by other places that should be open, but are not. So thanks.
Thank you. That again, I think is a challenge that we would see not just in the healthcare space, but across. Particularly, I think it's interesting in some, like genomics you mentioned, is a very kind of specialized category even within healthcare. And we can kind of break industries down into more and more granular levels, and then those down into more and more granular competencies, and then those into more and more granular kind of pieces of learning. And how does this all fit together in such a way that I, as a learner, can connect these things and know that overall they add up to X, which relates to Y, and how these pieces fit together, which is something that we're trying to figure out in terms of digital skills. So it's really interesting to hear that challenge that you're facing within genomics and within health as well. So one of the ways that we're looking at this, and I would love to talk about this more broadly as well, is around competency frameworks. So looking at the big picture of how genomics relates to other aspects of healthcare and relates to each other, and then really trying to break those down into their smallest pieces and then build them back up to a level where they're actually, the user experience isn't, you don't have 4,000 competencies that you have to name, they all kind of coalesce. So I think that's a super interesting challenge. I'd love to come back to that one as well. Right now, I just want to kind of get an inventory of things. And then I think we can come back to some of these and see how they relate to each other, or dive into some more closely. So thank you so far to everybody's contributions. Really appreciate it. Carrie, over to you.
Thanks. And I apologize. I'm recently returned to Vancouver after a few years in Ontario. So some of the things that I raised may have already been addressed as the supercluster has evolved. So the first thing I want to do is I just want to build on the concept of the competencies, because one of the things I'm from Northeastern University, and I'm a lifelong educator. And one of the things that I'm struggling with is how we can provide flexible, just-in-time learning for folks that can also stack up into a degree credential for them, so that they don't invest a lot of time and money in micro-credential, just-in-time learning, and then find themselves 5-6 years down the road after all of that investment, still butting up against some career limiting ceilings where the job postings are requiring a master's degree, or they're requiring an undergraduate degree. And so when I talk with some of our regulators about structures to enable stackable micro-credentials, the conversation about using an learning outcomes-based framework to achieve that end comes up time and time again, but the conversation pretty much stops there though. So this is something that I think would be interesting for us to look at. And also I put into the chat, sorry, anybody from Formlabs, I just gave you a little boost here with having the wrong link, but the work that Future Skills Center out of Ontario was doing, and their new model for occupation skills and technology, they're referring to it as MOST, how that can inform some of the work that we're doing here. And one of the pieces that comes out of that is technology for learning. And so that makes me think about what investments are being made in, for example, supporting teachers in K-12 to be able to provide a solid foundation for students in the K-12 system, so that they're developing the aptitudes and skills for careers in technology later down the road. Have we invested enough in equipping teachers in K-12 with that skill set and equipment and partnerships to do that? And also, how are we using technology to enable those learning opportunities, not only within the K-12 system, but also more broadly through flexible learning opportunities for people in careers, postgraduate, but just in general, what investments being made in technology-enabled learning content.
Thank you, Carrie. I think there's a lot to kind of get into here. Firstly, I think just the frequency with which just-in-time is coming up is really interesting. And I think it's something when we think about kind of on-the-job learning and some of these more micro or short cycle learnings that can happen. I think this is an interesting piece. And as we're looking at kind of the efficacy of L&D programs or learning and development programs writ large, often one of the major barriers is it's not relevant to my day-to-day job. Whereas when you've got something that's just in time, presumably someone's like, hey, I need to know this. Hey, here's the information, back and forth in that kind of positive feedback loop of learning and application. So I really like the kind of approach of just in time and how that's coming up. And it sounds like it's pretty relevant across different areas. So I think that's something that we can go a bit deeper on. And then the other thing that you talked about is technology for learning. So we used to say that we invest in skills for technology, not technology for skills. But that's actually something that we're looking to expand on and make investments into technologies as well. And learning and development skill related technologies in general. And this could relate to things like I mentioned, AI-based labor market analytics, up to things like VR-based training tools, some novel credentialing and the stackability, how these things fit together, learning management systems, really looking at how technology fits into the learning and development ecosystem. Typically, we don't focus on K-12. We focus more on mid-career kind of post K-12. So once you are in the workforce or looking to join the workforce, that's when we kind of get involved. But that's not to say that the K-12 side of things isn't critically important. And especially as it pertains to technology development, I think it can be mobile between different age groups because it's technology. Then you would plug in different content and approaches. So love all of that. I think there's a lot we can go on there. Thank you, Carrie. Ryan, I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to go to Robert for a moment. Rob.
Hi, Sydney.
Hi.
I'm talking specifically about the leading digital change piece, which is described as developing leaders with the skills needed to advance today's organizations, lead sustainable change, and develop world-leading innovations. It's really interesting. I've been talking to a lot of smaller companies in the clean energy sector recently on the subject of innovation. And the thing that I've noticed is that people really approve of innovation. They love the idea of being innovative. And if they were offered someone who could lead digital change in the way I've just described it, they would definitely be interested in employing that person. But they seem less keen to actually contribute to the development of those people. They seem more focused on their sort of short-term economic return on investment type issues that everybody's struggling with right now, particularly the smaller firms. And there seems to be a reluctance to sort of invest in their own people while they're at work in their company in terms of providing them with the kind of skills that we're looking at here. And it's sort of, to me, it's a kind of disconnect between what they want and need and what they're prepared to invest in. And I just see a big gap between the two.
So thank you for that. And that's very, very interesting. And it's something that we do here. And it's something when we talk about kind of the role that our co-investment can play and sort of de-risking learning and development in the way that we de-risk research and development is something we really look at, and there's a stat that we often talk about how Canadian industry typically underspends on training for their employees when compared with the US and other OECD nations. And really, that's a major challenge and something that we want to focus on, especially as, Ryan talked about the pace of change and people needing to be reskilled sometimes multiple times within the same role. And so I think that question of how do we support industry to make effective investments into training and developing the people that currently work for them and with them rather than just going out and bringing in new people every time you
Right.
need to reskill. And so I think the question of that as it relates to the clean economy is a really interesting one as well, because there's so much transition happening in that space in so many different areas. And so I think that, getting at how do we make more demand-driven investments or industry-led investments into L&D is a major question that we're trying to ask. So I can talk a little bit about how that's happened in other projects and how we're approaching that. But I'd like to come back to that one as well.
Sure.
So thanks, Rob.
You're welcome.
Ryan, over to you, and then to Brian.
I'm going to try to spit these out quick. So a few things that popped up. My credentialing and credentialing in general, it takes too long. So you've got, like, I'm on a pack right now, and it's like 2 years in the making of a new program, and everything's moved past it beforehand. You've got talented people that are capable of teaching, but aren't able to certify the ability, the skill level or what's being taught quickly. So how do you get the micro credentials lined up with the needs of the industry and the speed at which it moves? And also, when you talk about inclusiveness and Indigenous communities, I think we've glorified some of these roles, and a lot of software development roles and specific and technology roles have become blue collar. And so the acronyms, the wording, everything that we use in there, it's exclusive. And so how do we, and also, how can we challenge the need? Like, do I need to have a post-secondary to do these roles? And how do I challenge the post-secondary without having to go through it if I'm in mid-stage in career and need employment, need to make money, right? Like things like Denis with Plato testing, where they trained 580 hours of QA testing with Indigenous learners and then onboard them to work with the Big Four and a number of other contracts and things like that. So that kind of came out from that. And then the other thing that kind of popped into my mind is startup ecosystem. We have all these talented people that are trying to become leaders and are first-time startup CEOs, and they fail a lot of the time, right? How do we fail them forward so that we're actually taking that ecosystem and saying, hey, these are the people. Like, let's not let them get frustrated and go get a JOB somewhere because they don't succeed the first time. It's hard. I've failed a ton of times. Fortunately, I'm just really stubborn. So how do we keep those, how do we assist them in being stubborn? I also had help. I could afford to be stubborn. Some people can't.
Yeah, I think those are two really, really great concepts there to talk through. So, that exclusionary nature, or that kind of ivory tower, if we want to call it that, of tech roles and needing a 4-year computer science degree, and what do you actually need to work in the tech space, Ryan, I think is a really good question. And I think that connects again to the micro credentials and the credentials to say, what do you actually need and how can you get that quickly, and then connect that to ongoing learning so that you can develop. One thing is, you framed two challenges. One earlier was around how people aren't ready to join the workforce after coming out of some of the training, but also how can we make the training happen more quickly. And so these are two they sound like conflicting challenges, but I think they're part of the same piece, which is making it more relevant so that you're not learning the stuff that you don't need to learn or that you already know. You're breaking it up into the stuff that's critical for you and then keeping that up and keeping it up and keeping it up. So I think that's really interesting. And then the startup ecosystem question, I think this comes back to some of the stuff that Ralph was saying earlier as well, where, within the startup ecosystem, I think there are some specific challenges that are talent related, but not necessarily just entrepreneurship or, accelerator incubator related. And so what kind of approach would we take to workforce development that particularly pertains to entrepreneurs? And I think that plugs nicely into the kind of leading digital change or the innovation leader pillar of what we talked about. So thank you for those as well. So much here. Okay, Brian, over to you.
Yeah, I'm from the university side, and I want to, echo the last two speakers. I'm actually grew up in the Bay Area, did my PhD at University of California, worked in the Valley for a while, came up here, a faculty member at CIAT, at the School of Interactive Arts and Technology, SFU. I felt like there was a lot more interaction with companies in California. We can't have a waterfall model of education. When I teach my advanced students, I want a real project. I want to bring somebody in on video, give them the case, and let them go on it, and then I want to see that project judged. We did that when I taught entrepreneurship and solder. We had them do business plans. We got people coming from, venture capital to come in and give them some feedback. That kind of thing is gold for the students. It's also really useful to recognize when you're dealing with a university that, we are heavily siloed. And it's not that we're an ivory tower. We're a collection of small ivory towers that don't talk to each other. And we really do need, that kind of broad encouragement from the private sector and from government to work cross silo. Otherwise, it's really challenging to do that.
Thank you, Brian. I think that's another interesting one in terms of within post-secondary specifically connecting with industry, not just kind of broadly as a training ecosystem, but making sure that, the concept that you talked about around project-based learning and having that real feedback from industry, I think is really critical and gets to, again, what Brian had mentioned about, are you actually ready for the job that you're training for if you're just taking that waterfall approach and developing kind of concepts or things that might be relevant versus actually working on something. And to me, what all of this kind of relates to, both in terms of the just-in-time, the micro-credentials, is really connecting the needs of industry and not just the needs, but like actual companies and people from companies into the learning process so that it's kind of this positive feedback loop rather than one laddering into the other, the waterfall, as you mentioned, Brian. So I think that's really, really interesting. And it's interesting to hear the comparison with California as well. Rob, did you still have your hand up? Did you want to add something else? Oh, you're on mute there. Rob, you're on mute.
No, sorry, I'll put my hand down.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, so I think we've got more than enough concepts and ideas here to go on. And I will say, overall, and Barbara, I'll come to you in a moment. Overall, I think all of these are helping to contribute to the strategy. Even if we take one of these today and go deep on it, all of these are extremely helpful. And like I said, if we want to have a session where we go a little bit further on it, please don't hesitate to reach out and we can discuss it. I think there's so much here. We're not going to have the chance to get through it all today, but it's all really, really helpful. Barbara, over to you, and then we'll move on to the next section.
Thanks. I appreciate that so many people are needing talented people in a specific skill set within IT, but you also have to look at the small, medium-sized businesses because they can't have one person, all they do is IT. Oftentimes you get an owner or a manager that is trying to fill in things like marketing, bookkeeping, e-commerce, automation, and almost you need to have some sort of a course or support for these businesses that just need to go in, get support they need so they can take it back, but then also that they can be kept updated on how, for example, e-commerce is upgraded. Well, maybe they're doing it wrong. Maybe they should do it differently. I was just wondering if we could look, more about broad range perspective and include these small and medium-sized businesses.
So yeah, I think the SME thing is a great point. And to come back to the industry tie-in and under investing in L&D, I think we can talk about large companies having much more resource to put towards reskilling and upskilling or hiring versus small businesses that don't necessarily have the same level of resources and have individuals doing multiple different roles. And so, Barbara, just to make sure I understand, so would be, let's say you had a digital adoption program that would teach a business owner about digital adoption. What you're referring to is that kind of ongoing training. So it's not just, okay, now my business is online. It's like, okay, my business is online, but I need to keep updated so I stay relevant and I continue to have those skills. Is that right?
And they almost need a source because, as you know, so many small and medium-sized businesses work more than a 40-hour work week.
Yeah.
And then, by the way, they have to deal with everything that's going on online as well. Mm-hmm. And so many don't have a chance, and they need to make it basically instant. This is what you need to do in this time set. They'll give you this job skill to increase your business in the market share, particularly, like I said, with even marketing. Well, taking photos, how do they take photos and how do they post them online of what they're trying to sell, or with services, even cybersecurity. Someone we're so small, it's not going to be an issue. Well, it is an issue. So you need to inform these people in a way that is easier for them to access in a timely manner, because they can't go and take a term or a course even at a university level. It's just not there for them.
That's an interesting one, and I think so one of the things that we're looking at doing is focusing on essential or foundational digital skills. So this would be, it's not necessarily that you are going to be a developer, you're going to work with a tech job, but it's other jobs that need technical skills in order to thrive. And that's an area that we are looking at expanding into, and we'll be doing some programming on that. So let's talk about that as well. And anyone else who's interested in that, let me know.
I would say a lot of that you can find through available data. Like if you look at like some of the searches and some of the terms and some of the ed tech platforms, it's like Python's always high, but like combined with like machine learning and Excel as a stack, but also like no code platforms like Bubble and some of those ones do fairly well. And you can kind of see like where the landscape is for the ones that are hacking at it. And so like a lot of the data is available to see like what's needed and where the mismatch is.
Thanks, Ryan. That's helpful. And so now, in the interest of time, because I think we've spent the majority of today just talking through all of the different challenges and all of the different opportunities. And I think to me, what this speaks to is, there's lots of overlap between these, but it also articulates just how broad this challenge is. We're hearing a lot the kind of critical role that talent plays in the success of the ecosystem. And I think that this is really emphasizing that. So really appreciate everybody's input. So in the interest of time, like I said, we only have about 7 minutes left. So we're not going to get through this full document today. But is there something that, if we were to kind of go further on it, is there something that really stands out to people as kind of an overarching challenge or area of focus, or anything else that you see, you kind of have an idea of a solution around? So either kind of a concept that really resonates with you, or an idea that you have that comes out of these. Ryan.
I'm not shy about talking. So I do think that we need something that, and it very self-serving here, but I do think, I believe strongly that we need something that is end-to-end, that like has a connection to the employer, where you can actually help them onboard and make people succeed, right? So like if you look at specific stacks, what are consistent stacks that everyone's looking for? And like, how do you take somebody and actually get them into the organization, or then reskilled within the organization? So like have them tell you what they need in order to have this person be successful, and then combining a hybrid approach to it. Like most people might not need a full-time schooling approach, but they may need to have, they've probably done some work before, they're reskilling into another area. So how can you combine tutorial-based learning with some mentorship guidance workshops and things like that, so you're moving through it quickly, and then providing like some add-on supports afterwards? And then how do you bring in a market of people that are willing to do this? So like people that want to get more experience with training within their organization, how do you incentivize them to do that? So I think there is, I'm asking questions where I have some of the solutions, but I think you can build a platform that does take that, like works with individual companies, aggregates companies into groups, and then takes people through a process that gets them ready to work on things and continuously upskills them as they go.
Thank you, Ryan. That's great. I think that kind of aggregate approach is a really interesting one. Rob.
Yeah, so this would fall under the collaboration opportunities, and it kind of relates to our earlier discussion, because, as things are evolving in this field, there's clearly lots of things we don't know, and there's lots of challenges. But I noticed in the early part of your presentation, there seems to be an orientation towards sort of bringing people together, getting networks together, academia, small businesses, you guys, right? Is there an opportunity to bring together networks of people with a mutual interest in, for example, building digital leaders, and having them work together on these specific challenges or barriers to progress, but having them work together in a really specific way, which is that we use an innovation thinking process, right? So that we actually, as part of this network process, we get people to work together within an innovation framework, a process, which has the potential to create some really interesting, worthwhile, and new solutions to problems we all know about. It strikes me that, in BC in particular, we're that kind of province. People are always happy to contribute ideas, and if we did it in a structured way, I think you get some really interesting ideas that you could take away, just like you do, Sydney, from these sessions, and then turn into something concrete.
I think, yeah. So one of the things that I'll take from that, and I think there's a lot that we can do with this concept, is, we've got an overall, like, what does talent mean to you kind of session happening today, which is broad and is hitting on so many different points. But I think maybe what would be useful is a follow-up kind of session for each of the 3 specific areas where people can come kind of ready to talk about their specific either challenge or solution. So I think, we can get a little bit deeper on those specific pillars differently kind of in the follow-up to this. And I think that's a great concept. And then, the idea of taking kind of that innovation process approach, trying to unearth some actions and some solutions is all great as well.
And just to follow up on that, I'm also suggesting that the Digital Supercluster could have a leadership role in this, because the Supercluster could lead the setup of these networks, and sort of nurture them so that the whole community benefited from the good thinking and good ideas and good plans that emerged as all these problems gradually got solved. So you guys could really be, at the center of this.
So I want to talk about our approach to partnerships, but I'm going to move on and come back to that. And Janice, over to you.
Hi there.
Hi.
I'm Janice Fingler. My background is from the mining industry on the really front end of exploration, where we're really on the R&D side, so very entrepreneurial, no revenue, and trying to find things. So we're constantly working in uncertainty, and we have a workforce that has to be pivoting, being agile, and feeding into the extractive side of the industry, where jobs are more permanent. And so we're kind of streaming that way. So our workforce goes through, professionals as well, go through big boom and bust cycles. We're very tied to the market. So there's churn that can happen, churn, resilience, or more resilience. So we're in that environment as well, where there's a lot of people who aren't funded. Their training isn't funded, right? They do it themselves, that entrepreneurial spirit I've heard. Now, one of the things that is what we have, though, is we have a network of people and storytelling, and we know the signals that are happening not only on the ground to go and find the gold and the metals in the ground. We have to do sense making, pattern spotting, but we also have to be watching the market conditions and how things are changing around us. So we have that culture, and it's also quite connected, or it seems connected, to the Indigenous ways of knowing. In terms of looking for patterns and understanding patterns. Now, we have that in the technology world. And when I hear you, in terms of how do we sense where we are, we're hearing loads of ideas right now that are fantastic, but how do we sense where the opportunities are and what we need to put our resources and efforts at now versus later, short term, just in time versus invest longer term? The thing is none of us can see it all. We've only got a small group of us here. Surveys are very limited. They don't even necessarily include the design of people you're trying to survey. So we get excluded because we can't answer the question. We'll say, oh, it depends. And then I see assumptions being made on these surveys that are just wrong. You're not included, right? And so what can we do differently? Well, there's technology that's available that can bring qualitative data about asking about people's experiences, whether they're on the corporate side, the executive side, the government side, and actually map the patterns. It's called a SenseMaker, and it's been used in healthcare, military, even the BC government has been using it in different places to help with get indications of where we need to go. And you'll see what's going on, what's motivating the workforce, as well as if you put in an incentive, incentivize, try a project, you've got a way of monitoring the performance and adapting and tweaking as you go. So I'm wondering, that's just one example. Do we need to disrupt how we are actually measuring our performance and how we are scanning our environment to make choices together? Because there's a lot of great ideas that I know, being on the exploration side, that people see the patterns long before and the opportunities long before things have shifted. So is there something there that can help? That's already there. It's already out there. It's already scaled. It can plug in. There's API and all kinds of stuff.
So I know we're 2 minutes over time. So before I jump into that, I'm just going to say a huge thank you to everyone who's joined and contributed, and we will be following up. And it sounds like there's appetite maybe for further discussion as well. So stay tuned for that. If you are able to stay on a bit longer and chat through, Janice, I'd like to chat about that. And then Ralph, I see you have your hand up as well, and I'd love to hear what you have too. So feel free to stick around. And if you've got to jump off, again, thank you so much for joining, and feel free to reach out to me directly as well for any further discussion. I know that there's been lots of stuff happening in the chat too that I haven't kept an eye on. So I hopefully will be able to get through all the follow-ups as well. But Janice, to your point about, I think what you're talking about and what Robert mentioned, both of these to me, so we've got kind of the discussion of where should we focus, but also some contributions into how we should be thinking about where we should focus, which is such a fantastic contribution. And I think thinking through that kind of idea of a sense maker and incorporating Indigenous ways of knowing and looking at the design of how we map and understand information is great. I'd love to learn more about what you're referring to in that kind of sense maker piece, and how to kind of understand these different signals and how they fit together, because it is definitely something that there's a lot of signals and noise in relation to, and really knowing where we can make the most impact is definitely what we're here to talk about. So please shoot me an email, and I'd like to go deeper on that with you. Awesome. And Ralph, over to you.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. It's basically a comment that's, I suppose, a situational assessment based on what I've heard, and it's coming from the context of very early stage startups again, which is my wheelhouse, but it's flipping the situation. Normally you have startups that are always asking for help, for investment, but I actually think they could be part of the solution, because what I've been hearing is a lot about, for example, the fluidity of skills that are necessary. Over time, there's different trends, different programming languages, like Ryan was saying earlier. Other people were talking about the credentials being a barrier. Well, oftentimes when you're working at a very early stage startup, you have so many different hats. Sometimes you're learning marketing, digital marketing, programming, product management. All these are skills that you're acquiring that larger corporations are probably going to want. And as we were saying before, it's the nature of startups, 80 to 90% of them fail. So this could be an interesting source of talent and accelerating the needs of larger companies. So I was just thinking startups could be our help there.
Yeah, that is interesting. And thinking too what Rob was saying around innovation leadership, looking at and applied learning through an entrepreneurial lens, whether you're going to carry on running that company or not, using that as a way to develop some of these other key skills, including like entrepreneurialness or kind of that self-driving, keen to learn. Some of these kind of meta skills that go around those technical skills that you're learning are very much in demand, and something it's kind of hard to train for in a classroom setting. And so I do think that's a really interesting concept.
Especially because you're wearing many hats, whereas in a large corporation, you're usually doing one hat at a time.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, cool. Ryan.
When talking about collaborations, I think there's an interesting piece between companies, their employees, and platforms. So, there's, for example, going back to the software development, that's my space. So there's always a very small subset of software developers who enjoy teaching, and some of them are really amazing at it. And if we can nurture the growth of those trainers and teachers within organizations, and maybe even incentivize them. A lot of people do side hustles and things like that. Have them do a side hustle that benefits their own corporation, right? So identify, have them, start doing tutorials and training on things that will provide resources to anybody that's onboarding. So they're always going to be better at understanding the needs within the organization than an external party trying to come in and figure it out. So how do we make a process that allows them to quick, faster, or work in partnership with the platform with other groups, but have it so that it's accelerated because the people within the organization are actually contributing to that.
So kind of like a train the trainer, but with existing, like, so that the people who are learning and who have gained those skills most recently, and it's fresh in their mind, can go back and kind of contribute to that skilling ecosystem within an organization. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, and software developers specifically, there's a select group of them that love to teach and train, right? And so, but they still want to do software dev. They do not want to be teachers. So they want to be, so if you can give them a component of that that helps them further their career and makes it easy for them to do the content asynchronously, and maybe, you know, there's a mentorship and guidance piece within there, or maybe that's handed off to a third party.
And then to the point of some of the earlier questions around stacking and you know, is there an overall credential that even being a teacher can connect to and ladder up to, so that you're producing developer, but you're also developing these skills on the side. So that's really interesting too.
Which is also leading towards more senior level, right? Because when you get to more senior levels, it's really about being able to mentor and guide and help lead people and teach and be a good teacher.
Cool. Okay, so we've got a lot to go on here. I'm going to do my best to summarize this, not right now, but after the fact, so that we can send some follow-up with some of these kind of themes that have come up, some of these different ideas and industries and skill sets and how they relate to each other. And this will inform where we go next. So like I said, if we're going to be doing some follow-up sessions, you'll hear from me on that as well. I think there's lots more discussion to be had in the different areas. But in the meantime, please don't hesitate to connect. I'll put my email in the chat so that we can keep this conversation going. And if there was something specific that you wanted to talk through as well, yeah, please just reach out. Awesome. I'm typing my email now. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, Ed.
Enjoy your weekends.